Hi, this is Kathleen King, Reliable RN, and I want to talk a little bit about hormones and weight. Okay, let's get right into it. I'm just going to share my screen. All right, so a lot of us understand that weight loss has to do with calories and activities. You want to lose weight, you increase your activities, you lower your calories. That would be great if you're 20, right? Maybe. However, as we age, there's more to it than that. Our metabolism starts to slow. That's an issue. We have hormones that trigger our hunger, but we also have hormones that trigger our fullness. So we have to pay attention to our hormones as well as lower calories, higher activity. How do hormones affect weight loss? When we eat food, there's a hormonal response. That determines whether we store fat or burn fat. That's going to mean, does my waist get bigger or not? Weight and fat loss is regulated by hormones. So let's look at four of the big ones: leptin, insulin, ghrelin, stress. And the stress hormone is actually called cortisol. And we talk about an energy balance. You need to expend the same amount of energy as you intake, right? If you intake more, then you're going to create fat. If you expend more, then you might be able to burn some. A lot of these hormones interact with each other and it matters. And here's these two. So leptin and ghrelin. Leptin is high when you feel full and satisfied from eating. Okay. Ghrelin is actually is there to kind of tell you that you're hungry, right? So you wake up in the morning, ghrelin is high, and it's kind of saying, "Hey, I'm really hungry," right? So empty stomach causes it to rise, and then it signals your brain to eat. Leptin, on the other hand, once there's food in your stomach, it sends a signal up to your brain, takes about 20 minutes to say, "Hey, I've had enough food. That's great. I'm all done." However, what happens with a lot of people is we develop a leptin resistance because if you look on the picture, notice that fat cells produce leptin. So the more fat you have, the more leptin is being sent up to your brain. So the leptin is literally kind of always triggering your brain, and your brain learns to just ignore it because it can't be right because there's no way that you don't have to eat it all. So it stops responding to the leptin, and therefore you never actually feel full, right? So leptin resistance means you're hungrier more often. The issue with ghrelin is also that if you chronically have a high need for food, right? If your stomach is chronically saying that you're hungry, you literally also have an increased risk of storing the calories as fat because your body's going to save it for later when it thinks you're not going to feed it. So consistent eating actually does matter. The other two ones I want to talk about are cortisol and insulin. All right. So what happens is cortisol is our stress hormone. If you're being chased by a tiger, it goes up. Then your blood sugar rises to give you a ton of energy so you can run away from the tiger. Your insulin goes up to process all that extra blood sugar, and that's your cycle. So if you're being chased by a tiger, it's going to work perfectly. Most of us are not being chased by a tiger. So what happens is we have stress from other things: our job, our kids, our work, a million errands we need to run today. So what happens is our cortisol gets elevated, which elevates our insulin, which actually then also creates an insulin resistance. And again, it leads to a metabolic stress that elevates our level of cortisol, and we get this vicious cycle, right? So what happens is when we get too much insulin, right? Leptin is part of this as well, but when we get too much insulin, the resistance part of it leads to this metabolic, this body stress. So it's not that you're emotionally stressed, it's that your body is stressed. So it creates more cortisol. More cortisol releases more blood sugar. More blood sugar, again, starts this vicious cycle. And so what really ends up happening is your body starts storing food as fat in your midsection. That's what it does. All right. Thyroid, for some people, thyroid is the problem. If you have an overactive thyroid, you are more likely to have unexplained if you have an underactive, I'm sorry, thyroid, you're more likely to have an unexplained weight gain. If you have an overactive, you might have an unexplained weight loss. We do see thyroid issues in young people, but mostly we see people middle age and older. And if you notice, these are some of the symptoms. If your thyroid is kind of causing the problem and you can't kind of get your weight under control and you've done everything else, definitely worth checking in with a doctor. Okay, that's it for me. So I hope that this is helpful and explains just a little bit about how hormones might be affecting your weight at this point. All right.